Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. This show is about helping you grow as a coach by standing on the shoulders of giants. Each show, you get a different mentor in your ear. The early motivations, the successes, the failures, the tools, the tricks, and the insight into where the industry is going. All of it so you can make your own dent in the world. Remember, success leaves clues. Now, without further ado, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Whitwer. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Lauren Ammon, who is the director and founder of Performance Reimagined. Now, this was an awesome episode, and I think it's going to be great for that brand new coach. See, Lauren was a Division I swimmer. She'd done that for most of her life, and then she went into the corporate world for 15 years. But after about 10 years in that world, she was getting the kind of inkling that it wasn't right for her until she started to make that transition. Her business now is about 3 years old, so we get to dig into all of the nuts and bolts of what it was like starting the business, what were some of the things that she did well early on, what is she doing well now, and if she went back and did it all over again, what would she do differently? So if you are an early stage coach, this episode is going to provide a ton of value for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast with Lauren Ammon. Lauren Ammon, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I think you have a really interesting story that's going to help a lot of coaches, especially coaches that are making that transition. You know, they've been in another industry for a long time, and maybe they're not finding purpose, or they're just burned out and they want to do something different. And then they transition into the health and fitness industry. So we'll get into that specifically, but let's kind of go way back. You kind of had a cool career. I mean, you have to call it that. You were a student too, but it's like a career when you're a Division I swimmer or a Division I anything, or a college athlete for that means. But let's go back there. Let's kind of go back and were you always into like health and fitness and performance, or was it your kind of career that got you into it?
I think it was really my career. I mean, I started swimming when I was 5 and I ended when I was 22. So yeah, I do call it a career. I was thrown in because I have 2 older sisters and who were already swimming. And my mom, she tells the story, was I had a lot of energy and I was always asking for snacks. So she just needed to get that out of me. And I always say this, I don't ever remember falling in love with it. Like I don't remember the time that I fell in love with it, but it was pretty soon after I started. I just loved it.
Okay. Awesome. Was there a specific type of swimming that like you specialized in? You kind of do it all?
No, I was very much an endurance swimmer. So I always say this, the things that Katie Ledecky swims, I swam, she just swims them way faster than I did.
That's great. And then, I mean, obviously you did well enough throughout high school that you swam at the Division I level. Where did you go to school?
Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, right down the road from U of M.
Cool. And I mean, was that kind of always your dream to be a collegiate swimmer, or was it just like that's the logical next step?
It was all, well, see, I was actually talking about this with my sister one time. I swam, my club team that I swam for was really competitive here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And like, I want to say high 80s, 90% of us went to swim in college. So yes, it was a dream, but it was also like, I didn't know there wasn't another option in a way. It was just always kind of like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, I think that's kind of a testament to who you surround yourself with as well. Like that's what everyone's doing. So that's kind of like the assumed next step, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talk about this all the time. My former teammates and I, like, we have never found another team like that team in terms of how hard everyone worked, how connected everybody was, and just that like community of swimming is an individual sport, but you have a team surrounding you. Right. And we talk about it all the time. It's just like, it was one of the best environments to grow up in. And now that I have children of my own, I realize even more how special it was. Mm-hmm. And just the I don't even know how to describe it, just the joy that it added to my life in a way.
And was it always expected to go to like the Division I level? Because there's one thing about swimming collegiately, but swimming collegiately at the Division I level is kind of another beast in and of itself.
Yeah, I think it was always just part of the assumption. I know that makes me sound like an ass, and I don't mean that way. It's just, again, I was surrounded. I was on a great team. Most,
Right.
if not all, went to Division I. It was like, yeah, just quote unquote part of the journey. This is what we do. My parents always said. My parents never pressured me to do anything. They never pressured me to stay in swimming. They never pressured me to love swimming as much as I did. Though there was an expectation that, hey, if you want to compete in college, we really would love for you to get a scholarship if you can. So choose wisely, do what you think is best for you and, do that. And so that was always in the back of my mind, but never as a pressure-filled moment. It was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to find the environment that works, and I'm going to make sure that where I go is where I want to be, and the school is going to help me get through that.
Right. And I mean, there's, there's probably something to, if there's high level swimmers that come before you, right, you're going to just be in the eyes of more coaches they know that this program produces swimmers. And so you're going to have more eyes from big universities on that program, which then gives you the opportunity to, show your skills in front of people that make decisions. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there are always coaches at our biggest meet, and again, I'm going to sound like an ass, but like it never registered to me. It was just my environment. It was just how life was. I didn't know there was anything different in a way.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the lesson there, right, to take away in any area of life is who we surround ourselves kind of creates the norms in our head, right? If you want to make a lot of money, you should probably surround yourself with other people that make a lot of money because they just think in those terms, right? I want to be a great athlete. I should probably hang around other great athletes and do what they're doing because it's just assumed that this is what we do as a group and, this is where we're going to go. And it creates more opportunities really for everybody because there's more eyeballs on like, wow, that program is really producing a lot of high achieving individuals.
Yes. Yeah. It was one of the greatest experiences in my life, hands down.
So post-college, you aren't in the career or you didn't want to, or you weren't getting into the career that you're in now, but you kind of had glimpses of it. So tell me a little bit about like, hey, all right, I'm an elite swimmer. Fitness has been a part of my life for a really long time. And what were you thinking about post-college as far as career goes?
Well, I had gone to school for my bachelor's is in political science, and I had every intention of going and getting my JD in law school, being an attorney. And when I graduated from undergrad, I had retired from swimming. Swimming was over. Well, I was forced to retire, right? And I took the LSAT, and I didn't get into law school. So
okay.
I was in a crossroads of, well, what the hell do I do with my life now? And I have to say, it took me about 18 months to 2 years to figure that out after school. I will say it was kind of a dark moment in that being a retired athlete, I didn't necessarily foresee the struggle that would create. No one ever talked about it. Even my two sisters. I just had this conversation with them the other month. Like, did you guys struggle after you were done swimming? Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like, then why the hell didn't any of us talk about it? But different story for a different day. And I actually kind of fell into my master's degree. So because I was a political science student, I studied a lot of law when I was in school. And my mom had made the suggestion, hey, you love law. Why don't you look into human resources? There's always that legal component. So I went and got my master's in human resources after college at UC, the University of Cincinnati. And what's really funny is I got into HR, and employment law is probably one of my least favorite topics on the planet. Just not my jam. And I'm right. Now that I have the hindsight of looking back, I don't think I would have been very happy as an attorney. And to have spent that much money to get myself through law school and then no longer be an attorney, I think I would have had more regret about that than I do not getting into law school. So I spent 15 years in human resources, and where I really found myself was in the space of what they call in human resource talent development. So looking at the people and understanding, okay, what are the strengths you have now? What are some of the opportunities or skills you need to build? And then how do we mash all that together to get you to the place where you want to be, whether that's a new leader, a new position, whatever the case may be. That's where I found myself gravitating towards.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
One of the things I love most about Coach Catalyst.
There are lots of things I love about Coach Catalyst.
And the reason why I love Coach Catalyst is that
the accountability off the back of that
is simplicity.
The support is amazing.
It allows me to give so much of me to my clients.
The drip feeding of content.
I can schedule lessons for my clients in advance.
Game changer for freeing up time.
It gives me my time back.
It's so simple and so easy.
Hi, I'm Kane, the founder of Coach Catalyst, the #1 accountability and communication software on the market today. We help coaches just like you keep their clients accountable and scale their business beyond what they've ever been able to do before. So if that sounds like something you want, let's take a look at how we can help. So Coach Catalyst was built on the 4 C's of coaching. Those are content, communication, community, and consistency. So for content, you need to go beyond just workouts and deliver the whole experience for the client so they get the results they deserve. For communication, you need to own your communication. If you don't own the communication, you don't own the client. So make sure you stop texting clients and use a centralized platform. For communities, get off of Facebook groups and take ownership over your social group with Coach Catalyst communities. And for consistency, the foundation of all results for clients, we took the best-selling book Atomic Habits and built all these fundamentals right within our app that's going to guarantee to get your clients the best results possible. If you want to start using the 4 C's with your clients, content, connection, community, and consistency, make sure you run over to Coach Catalyst and start a free trial today.
So that's really interesting. So was there a level of like coaching that's involved in that? Like you're kind of helping these people along with their career? Or is it more like just kind of telling people what you're seeing from your side and here's how they could potentially improve?
Well, at the time for me, it was a little bit of both. I think, and I don't know that I've ever I don't know that I've ever said this or articulated this, but I think that's why I really appreciated that section of HR is like 1, to build relationships with people,
Mm-hmm.
2, to figure out, okay, here's where you currently are. Here's the future state you want to go to. What do we need to do in the middle to get you there? Right. It's just like an athletic journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? I start the season. I know how I want to end the season. What do I need to do over the next 7 months to get myself to the times that I want to swim? Right. Again, I think it was just kind of this natural thing, but I will say that when I was in HR, the word coaching gets thrown around a lot. And I'm one of those people that I don't want to call myself something if I don't necessarily have some background information or education in terms of what it means to actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, having been surrounded by, I think literally in my athletic career, probably like close to 50 coaches, right? I know that you can go through programs to become more effective coaches. So when I was in human resources, I would work with coaches or, think about, that term was thrown around a lot, but I wouldn't say at that time I was a coach, but I think it was always in the back of my mind.
Right. I think that's a product too of being in sport for 15 years, 17 years. You have great coaches, probably had some bad coaches and like anyone, right? And the great ones are like, they do things differently and they really care about you. And the bad ones, we just try and move on and forget about. And hopefully they don't scar athletes to a point where it kind of kicks you out of the sport or takes away a love. And so, coaching is definitely something that's probably always been there. And so when you were finishing your master's, was it always like, hey, I want to go into HR, I'm going to go find it and work for a big company? Or was there anything in the back of your mind that was like, maybe I want to do something in sport or in fitness or in coaching?
Yeah, at the time, because that was back in 2007, at the time, there was no thought about sport or fitness or coaching.
Okay.
Actually, the thought was that part of my life is over. It's time to quote unquote move on.
Right.
Is what was going on in my mind at the time.
Get a real job. Go work for a company. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're doing the HR thing. Did you go and work for a big company? Was it a small company?
Yeah, it was actually my first job was a big international company. So talk about being a fish out of water. I didn't necessarily know what was going on, but it was part of the learning process. And actually, I entered the workforce in 2007, and then 2008 hit. And I remember thinking, oh dear, I didn't know what a furlough I had no idea what a furlough was. I had no idea what severance packages were. And, it was like thrown into this gauntlet of, oh, I didn't know that this would be a part of the world where you're not responsible for taking someone's job away, but you're certainly responsible for sending the message and having to work with someone through that process. I will say that was a big slap in the face. And, going back to what your question of, were you thinking about sports or fitness? No, I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but I really did feel out of place in corporate America.
And why do you think you felt out of place? Was it less of a team? Was it like, why do you feel like you were out of water?
Well, my perception at the time was that it wasn't necessarily always team oriented. Right? Going back to my experience and the team that I grew up on, right? It was, of course, there was competition. We're all swimmers, right? I mean, we're all vying for notoriety and medals, right? But there was just this undercurrent of, yeah, you may do better than me, but we're on the same team and we have some pretty genuine relationships here. And I guess I just, again, naive, I always figured that would always be the case, no matter what team I'm on. That's how we do things. And that wasn't the perception. That wasn't my experience, particularly in those early days, because it was like, oh, well, we have to cut, X amount of money from the budget based in headcount. So we're just cutting people off a team and off you go. And, some of the decisions were arbitrary around that, or at least I perceived them to be arbitrary around that.
Right.
And it was way more competitive than I ever anticipated or knew how to deal with, quite honestly.
And so how long were you in the HR world for?
In total, just under 15 years.
And so you're not still in the HR world. So at what point were you like, I'm ready for something different, or I want a new challenge, or I want to move on? When did you start thinking about that?
Yeah, so it was actually 2015. And I had gone to my boss at the time, and that's when the idea of coaching really started to enter into my mind. And I thought, hey, I always said that if I wanted to try this, I wanted it to be quote unquote official. I wanted to go through something to teach me how to effectively coach other people. And I went and I researched different programs here in the United States. And I was like, this might be good. But then I went to her, and unfortunately the organization couldn't support it from a budgetary standpoint. So fast forward through, a couple of years, and I was at another company at the time, and I had gotten to the point where I was just really unfulfilled doing HR work. It's kind of the same work regardless of the organization. And I wasn't feeling fulfilled or energized or that I was part of any team at that point. And it was just, I remember the day I was in a meeting and I had done a PowerPoint presentation 4 different times. And my boss's boss was like, well, why don't you make these tweaks? And then I sat there and I listened to her suggest the tweaks I needed to make. And I was like, I did that in the first presentation. And it was just one of those moments of pure and utter frustration. And I was like, this is it. And it was one of those moments. And I have to say, I am a very emotional person. I make a lot of decisions emotionally. And I was so frustrated. I was like, what the hell was the name of that company that I looked at for coaching? And I went outside. I was so incredibly frustrated. I started bawling. I hopped on the phone to this coaching program, and the introductory conversation with the salesperson is really what she was, had me at her story. And I was like, yes, this is where I want to be. And this is what I want to do. And that was the moment that I decided I'm going to try something different.
In that coaching program, was it just kind of like a general mindset performance, or was it specific to another industry?
No, it was general. I mean, it was the Institution of Professional Excellence in Coaching, which is IPEC. And it was actually the #1 coaching program in the United States in 20 or 21. So it's kind of like a general program, but it is year long. It's pretty intensive. And I thought, this is an opportunity to just really dive in head first and see what's on the other side.
And did you have an idea on what type of coaching? Was it more like corporate coaching, where it's more like better management techniques, or what were some of the skills that you were getting out of this?
Yeah. So that was the original intent because, HR was my world, right? That's what I knew.
Right,
And
yeah.
like a lot of what I worked on was like manager development programs or leadership development programs. And so that was the original intent. And so when I was going through the program, it was all about how can I continue to support organizations from a leadership standpoint, but just from maybe outside the organization. Or there was a thought like, hey, could I carve out a coaching niche for myself within an organization and build that up? Because a lot of organizations don't have that internally. They tend to go outside to find it and bring it into the organization.
Right.
So that was my original thought, is really focusing on what I was talking about before. Like, here are the skills you have. Here's the position you want. How do we fill in the gaps in the middle to help get you there, skill-wise, temperament-wise, mindset-wise, and to move people within an organization forward.
Mm-hmm. So when did that change? Because that's not what you're doing now.
No, that's not what I'm doing now. So I started my coaching practice in 2020. So, January of 2020, and then my kids came home and things were a bit weird, just like for everybody else. But I really was focused on leadership development and career transition during that time. And I did that for about 18 months. And the idea of sports and nutrition and fitness and all of those things are constantly in the back of my mind. In 2000, so I retired in 2004. By 2007, I was already running marathons just to fill the void. Like, I needed something to get back into it. So I've been an avid former athlete since I retired. And it's always in the back of my mind. I was talking with a business coach of mine, and he said to me, it just never seems like you can get it out of your system. And it was the first time in my life that I allowed my love for all of that to come back into my world. Like, I had thought, like, I'm done with it. I can't go back. There's nothing I can do now. So this was in the back of my mind. And then the 2020 Olympics started. And I had the gut feeling that it was going to be a rough go of it. Just because of the atmosphere, right? There were no spectators. Like, what athlete likes to perform in front of no one, right? That's just weird. And so I just had this kind of gut feeling of this might be a tough one to watch this year. And it was the night that Simone Biles removed herself from competition, which we knew was coming because of the way that, it was in Japan and they were so far ahead of us. And then it was the same night that Katie Ledecky won the 1500 meter freestyle for the first time that women ever got to swim it. And she didn't necessarily have a great swim. She was about 20 seconds off of her world record. And just watching her and some of the emotion that she was trying to hide after that swim, and just like feeling a little bit of a disappointment. Again, I'm totally speculating here. I've never spoken to her about what she felt afterwards. But then shortly in that same night, Michael Phelps came on and said the words that I had thought for 30 some odd years, but just didn't know how to articulate, which were, competing is really overwhelming. We just want someone to talk to. We just want someone who listens to us, who allows us to be vulnerable and doesn't want to fix us. And it was in that moment I thought, oh my God, yeah, this is an opportunity to, utilize my career as a swimmer, and then utilize my career figuring out how the heck to get out of your own head and deal with your own mindset, and combine those two things to support athletes to train their minds like they train their bodies.
At this time, did you have any clients?
Not athletes, no.
So what was the first step? This is one thing, like business ideation, like, okay, cool. Now I know who my avatar is, who I want to serve. I see their needs. Whether or not they recognize they actually need that is kind of probably a longer conversation, right? And so how did you then go, okay, this is where I want to go? What was the first step you took in moving in that direction?
That's a great question. The biggest aha moment I had was I finally figured out who I want to serve. Like, it was the first time that it was like, it felt right to me.
Yep.
I would say the first step I did was to brand myself in that world, right? Is to really figure out how to connect with athletes again. And that just comes so naturally to me, because it's where I feel the most like myself, is when I'm in the presence of other athletes and regardless of what sport you played or did, there is this commonality or connection between all of us, between like a football player or swimmer or golfer, whatever the case may be. So it was all about rebranding myself in that space, coming back to the sweats, coming back to the relatability of what it means to be an athlete.
So getting even a little more granular and tactical, did you go out and start speaking to kind of your local youth organizations or sports teams, or did you go back to your old club? Or was there anything that you did kind of like tactically from a brand standpoint outside of maybe like changing website on who you serve and maybe doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So back to your point in terms of like, did they even see the need for it? Right. I actually went back and talked to a lot of my old teammates and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Would this have been helpful way back then? Right. Because I knew it would have been helpful for me, but I didn't know if I was alone in that respect. And yeah, it was talking to teammates on my former club team here in Cincinnati. It was talking to my former teammates from college. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And they're like, remember that terrible sports psychologist we had? I'm like, yeah, he didn't do anything for us. And so, yeah, that need was there. And it was just going back into that world and then connecting too with parents of athletes that I knew, right? I have sons, but they were a little bit still on the younger end of the spectrum. So I reached out to parents I knew who had older athletes in that space and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Would this be of benefit, do you think, in this world?
As a coach that runs challenges, I needed my life back. I had stuff all over the place. A Facebook group for community interaction, Google Sheets for check-ins and measurements, and was drowning in email communication. As my challenges grew past just a handful of people, I started to notice clients were falling through the cracks. I began researching virtual assistants because I just couldn't manage it all. And truthfully, the client experience was going down the drain. Luckily, a friend recommended Coach Catalyst and just told me to trust her. I'm sure glad I did. Now I can run my challenges with 2 or 200 clients with just a few clicks. The lessons get delivered on the right days, the accountability happens automatically, and most importantly, the communication is all in one spot. I even created 2 new challenges from the Coach Catalyst library. Best part, didn't have to change a thing. I used to spend 15 minutes just trying to log into all the apps I needed. Now I log in and my dashboard tells me who needs a shout out and who needs a kick in the butt in about 15 seconds. I feel like a huge weight is lifted off of my shoulders. I can finally spend my time coaching again instead of worrying about all the admin work. Do your brain a favor and get Coach Catalyst.
And so right away, were you thinking from a service offering, were you going to create like a course, 6-week course that people might go through? Or were you thinking one-on-one coaching? Or how are you thinking about like the business structure?
God, that's a great question. Because I think, well, one, I tend to jump around. That's just, my MO. But I had originally thought of, I was actually pulled into a local high school here in Cincinnati. Someone had found me here in Cincinnati on LinkedIn and said, hey, we're actually dealing with a lot of challenges with our student athletes in the school. Unfortunately, successful suicides or maybe even attempted suicides. And so where my mind originally went to when I was pulled in is having conversations with this specific school and trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, that's something I hadn't thought of. How might I support students at scale, like getting into a school and being a resource there? That didn't necessarily pan out the way. And it took me a long time to figure out, okay, there is opportunity there, but that's a longer term play than just like walking up to a school and saying, hey, I'm here. How can I support your student athletes?
Right.
So from that moment, when I started to see that would be the longer play, that's when I went back to going one-on-one because I really wanted to meet one-on-one with current athletes and figure out what is the language they're using? What are they truly struggling with? How does that differ than what I went through 20 some odd years ago? What are some of the similarities? And knowing all of that information, how then to put a program together for them that is enough to take each of them through like certain concepts and teaching them certain concepts, but also meeting them where they are individually and understanding how to best support them based on their specific needs.
So right away, were you like, hey, I'm looking for a few test clients that I want to kind of take through this program and develop almost like a curriculum to an extent? Or were you out there right away saying like, here are my services, here's what I can offer, maybe looking at it like a psychologist or someone that does appointments and kind of people pay per appointments? What was your structure and your thinking like right when you first started?
Yeah, the structure was, it was kind of a hybrid of both. So actually people were finding me. I was telling other adults, in my network, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I was actually getting a fairly good number of referrals. But what was really important to me is I did want to have enough of a structure, but also meet the athlete where they are. And it's when I had about, I think it was 3 at the time, they all kind of like came at the same time. And so in full transparency, I've figured it out as we went along. Like I took the first couple of sessions to really dive into the world. And what I started to see is, despite the fact one was a swimmer who was a senior in high school, one was a soccer player who's a 6th grader, which I wasn't necessarily anticipating going in the junior high world. One was a sophomore golfer. They were all having somewhat of the same challenges. So when I started to see the themes, it was I had enough context. And then I started putting a program together and then putting each of them through the basic concepts, but modifying it to their specific challenge. Mm-hmm. And so now it's like built into a more well-developed program at this point.
And so with those age kids, they don't have any money. Mm-hmm. So you're obviously selling to parents. And you said you were getting a lot of your kind of referrals from other parents. Was that a conscious decision for you? Were you like going through your phone and just like hitting people up and saying like, hey, just want to let you know, I've transitioned out of maybe the corporate world, excuse me, and I'm now doing this performance coaching. I know you have young kids, if you're ever in need of anything, just, think of me. Or was there a different strategy that you had to try and, get the word out there?
It wasn't a conscious one. I did not go through my phone. It was more or less, I was just talking. This may not necessarily be the most effective strategy on the planet, but I was just talking to other adults where I just felt comfortable just ideating and not being as like structured and sales oriented, but it was more about talking to them about my mission, what I was really interested in. And then they connected me with other parents who were in the realm of looking for resources for their athletes already.
Got it. And were these athletes probably higher, I call it higher end, but higher achieving type athletes? Like they were the best players on their team, or they're looking at playing at the next level?
Yes. Those are the ones that I find that I'm attracting, are the ones who are, as I said, in 6th grade, she eventually wants to compete at the women's national soccer team. Like she has like huge dreams of doing that. Another one wanted to swim for Ohio State. The other one wants to, go to the University of Michigan. So yes, those are the ones that I'm finding are coming into my world. And quite honestly, those are the ones that I most want to support because with those big dreams tend to come big pressures and big expectations and how to manage those.
Right. And so at the beginning, was it like, hey, we'll do 5 sessions. So you sold like a 5-session pack, or was it like, we just go one by one and you kind of bill the parents each time a session is done?
Yeah. So what I always say to them is that we'll start with 12 sessions, right? In my experience, when I was working more corporate related, whether it be in my experiences, I was being coached in corporate, or once I had some of my corporate clients, I found that kind of 12 session or 3 month, right? If you're taking weekly sessions, worked really well. So that's how I position it to parents and say, hey, this is the first 3 months. Based on where we end after those 12 sessions, that's where we'll come and really talk about what are the next steps. If you feel that the athlete has enough of a foundation and resource right now, allow them to kind of go out into the world and see how it works. Or if you want to continue month by month after that.
Right. So were these 30-minute sessions? Were they 60-minute sessions?
60 minutes. Yeah, I always like to go 60 minutes. I think it offers the opportunity because of the age group that I do. I tend to do a little bit more training and coaching versus more like traditional strict coaching. So it's really kind of 30 minutes in terms of introducing a topic. We talk about it and then, kind of coach them through what that looks like for them in their life.
So give me an example of like the training aspect of it. and how you would incorporate that in the session.
Yeah. So a specific example, I had one this morning is we were talking about goal setting, and we do goal setting a little bit differently. So, my whole philosophy is that every athlete is looking to achieve something, whether it's be on top of the podium, the medal, the gold, the time, whatever. That conventional wisdom, though, isn't necessarily always the most effective when it comes to performance, because oftentimes what an athlete is doing, and I was guilty of this myself, is like prejudging how your performance, quote unquote, should go based on your journey through training, right?
Right.
So we look at things, and so I don't say to them, hey, don't set goals in terms of certain times or certain placement or whatever. It's how do we find the balance between what you want that outcome to be and the process you take to get there. So in terms of training, what I help them understand is there are two ways to approach sport. You can look at the outcome or you can focus on the process. What we try to do is find a healthier, a more effective blend of those two things, because most athletes, understandably so, because that's the way that the athletic world is built, is the outcome.
Right.
And so helping them understand that your outcome doesn't necessarily determine your worth, but those two things can be interlinked. So we train them in terms of, here are the two approaches you can take when it comes to sport. Here's actually how we're going to set goals slightly differently than what maybe you know or have been trained, so that you are focusing a little bit more on the process and the outcome and being able to shift and handle any adversity that comes your way, because you're not necessarily, if you don't hit the outcome you want at the time you want to get it. So that's what we talk about. We train, we go through these concepts and what that means, and then we apply it to their life.
And so in a session, are you having kids like write stuff down? Are they putting things on paper to really try and crystallize and really, figure out that process and the outcome and what they want to accomplish?
Yeah. Actually, I let the athlete determine that. So my 6th grader, yes, she loves to write things down. She loves to take notes. The football player that I'm working with, he likes to sit and listen. It's more of a dialogue and a conversation. He asks me a lot of great questions. And so we have a little bit more back and forth. So that is one of the ways that we personalize it to the athlete as well, is that we're not necessarily forcing them into a box, but we're asking them what they prefer and then meeting them where they are in terms of how they learn and what's most effective for them.
Cool. So when you were first getting started, did you look at like other fields that do this kind of similar structure of like one-on-one meetings, and we're going to do X amount of sessions? Because you're not dealing with insurance or anything like that. So you can kind of figure out, like, your rates are determined by what you want to charge. And so did you take inspiration from anywhere else to try and figure out what's the model that I'm going to use in order to get my services out there?
Well, I took some inspiration from, there was a little bit of guidance when I went through my coaching certification.
Okay.
They focused more on how to actually coach versus building the business.
Yep.
But there was some inspiration there. I have coming out of that program, I made friends with a ton of other people who were becoming coaches. So took some inspiration from how they structured it and really kind of leaned on what I actually wanted. And by that, I mean, what I found in my journey is that I tend to lean on other people's expectations of what I think it should look like. And so part of my own journey and my own coaching journey is leaning more into what I feel is right for me. So I tried to do a blend of all that. I've used some things as inspiration, see what I like about it, see what maybe I don't like about it, and then shift it to fit what I feel is right for how I want to approach it.
Mm-hmm. So you got those first 3 clients basically through kind of a word of mouth, let's call it, right? Referrals, word of mouth. And, 3 clients are great, but 3 clients don't make a business. And so how did you then kind of take that next step into, getting more clients in order to really build a business and create an income that you wanted?
Yeah. So, and that's one of the bigger challenges for me based on the client that I support, right? They're busy student athletes who are in school, in practice, have competition, those sorts of things. So I always knew in the back of my mind that would always be kind of a wall I was eventually going to hit in terms of scalability. So one of the things that really came up was, how do I meet them where they are and allow them to have resources in a way that's on their own time, they could do on their own pace, but also provide the opportunity to reach someone like me if they wanted more one-on-one. So that's where we're in the process of building an academy for them, so that it is something that it's like, create your own learning journey in terms of how to build your mindset, allowing them the opportunity to come online, take an assessment. The results would say, hey, here's where you probably have some of your biggest opportunities. Here's some content based on those results that will get you started in terms of mental training, and being able to provide them with something they could do on their own time during their busy schedule. But because other athletes are entering into this community, they then have access to a bigger team that they wouldn't have access to if they didn't join the community.
Got it. And so are you bringing on other professionals to kind of be part of this platform, or is it just a way for you to kind of scale yourself?
It's a combination of both, actually. So eventually we want to bring in other experts, whether they're on the nutrition side, the movement side, right? A lot of athletes these days, and this is part of the targeting system of ideal clients, is parents who are already investing in their athlete in multiple ways, whether it's, a separate personal trainer or a nutritionist or, a specific chiropractor, somebody like that, right?
Yep.
That is the vision, is to bring in other experts so that it becomes more of a lifestyle brand for athletes and looks at and supports them from a holistic point of view.
Got it. Cool. You mentioned something about an assessment. And so the stuff we're talking about really doesn't have like tangible, I can touch, my time gets faster, this or that, right? It's very much like this kind of like esoteric, I feel better, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, that's great. I did my job then. All right, we're good. So do you use an assessment at the beginning and then an assessment at the end to really kind of show the efficacy of the program?
Yes, that's exactly what we do, because you are absolutely right. There are no tangible outcomes other than the athlete's self-assessment of, I feel more relaxed, I feel better, I'm more confident, like those sorts of things, right? So yes, we have them take an assessment at the beginning. There are times that we'll take it in the middle, again, depending on the athlete and or how long they want to progress. And then at the end to show, hey, here are where you made some adjustments. Here's where you're continuing to work and improve yourself. Because that's the other thing. Like, when you're working on your mindset, there's always an evolution to it, because you as a human grow, change, how you view yourself and view the world changes. And so it's this constant kind of re-upping of your skills in order to see, hey, based on what I'm experiencing, am I still making progress?
I love it. And I mean, do you send it to the parents as well? Because ultimately they're the ones that are kind of like footing the bill. And so they want to see progress.
Yes. So I don't necessarily send the results to the parents. Again, that's very personal to the athlete. So what I tend to do is give the parents just enough information to let them know what we're talking about. And I even tell them, hey, I'm not necessarily going to tell you every single thing that the athlete and I talk about, because that's part of the benefit of me, if I'm this neutral third party that is separate from mom and dad. But I tell the athletes that too. I say, if there's something that we discuss that, from my professional opinion, believe that it's important for your parents to know, we will have that conversation. You will be a part of it. You will know that I'm having that conversation with them. But yes, I do send the parents information as we go. So one, they know what we're talking about. Two, how the student is progressing, but then encourage them together to have conversations and provide skills and resources for both of them on their respective sides to have more effective conversations with one another.
That's awesome. So this kind of started locally, right? You're probably meeting with people in person. Have you continued with it and just tried to grow your kind of local footprint and become like the go-to performance expert in Cincinnati? Or have you tried, because of technology and people are really comfortable with it and Zoom and all that kind of stuff, have you tried to kind of move into other communities?
Oh yeah, definitely a mixture of both, right? Because Cincinnati, for anybody who knows, it's a big city, small town. Like everybody knows everybody. So there is an opportunity to kind of carve out my niche here in Cincinnati. But have started working nationally. I have somebody in Michigan, potentially even in Tennessee. So starting to branch out, and that's kind of the beauty too of the academy or community, is that it would allow for anybody across, and truly anywhere. We would focus more in the United States, I think, in the very beginning. But yes, would offer the opportunity to have multiple communities.
So knowing what you know now, you've been kind of in this for what, about 3 years, give or take? So knowing what you know now, after 3 years of kind of the business evolving, is there anything you would change when you started right at the beginning, or was there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
Oh my gosh, yes, that is such a great question. So many things. I would have been less forceful. If I could do it all over again, I'd be less forceful. And by that, I mean like trying to force and chase what I thought was the right thing to do, because what that led me to was trying to be everything in my business and try to be everything to everyone. And that has always been one of my biggest development opportunities, is to slow down, be more thoughtful, and be purposeful in what I choose to do versus trying to shove 20 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag.
So when you say being more forceful, was it like you weren't focused enough on a single like demographic and it was like, I help anyone at any time? Or am I missing kind of the boat on that?
No, you're right there, right? Because everyone tells you niche down,
right?
There's riches and niches, which I believe, but finding a niche is not as easy as it sounds.
Right. Yes. 100%.
There's that. So yes, I would have been more purposeful and allowed. I think you have to be a little bit more open in the beginning to figure out what you want to get down to.
Okay.
But be more purposeful in that. But be more purposeful in like what I did to start. It was like, get a website, get a lead magnet, learn about email marketing, find your clients, find your network. And it was like all these things versus taking one or two of those buckets and saying, hey, this is what I know I like doing. Mm-hmm. Let me get really good in these things, figure them out, and then like be more purposeful in terms of, okay, what does it really mean to like get an email marketing campaign together? Like what all is needed? It was just like, give me all the information, I'll figure it out, versus, whoa. What am I actually really good at? What do I want to do? And then how do I then find other resources to do the other things for me?
Got it. So for you, what would have those things been? What would have those elements of it? Really, marketing is kind of what it comes down to. What would those things have been for you?
Yeah, I'm trying never to figure out any sort of email marketing system. I can guarantee that. For me, it was more about like getting my thoughts out there. Like I tend to love to talk. I love to like put thoughts out there, and as I'm talking, kind of find my way through it. As if anybody listening can probably sense that. But like just being a thought leader in terms of here's how I perceive mental training among athletes, right? Versus trying to like be similar to everyone else and do all of the channels, but just literally, I think I would go back and just pick Instagram and say, hey, I'm just going to be out here and I'm just going to keep putting thoughts out here and see what sticks, versus trying to be everywhere in every platform and trying to be everything in all of those platforms.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, especially early on. And the other thing that, you talked about was just telling people, right? You just had conversations about what you were doing with the person you're standing next to or people in your circle, which then kind of opened up that next level of opportunity. I think I see too many coaches, they just think that like social media or Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, like that's the answer. If I just do a bunch of stuff there, like it's all going to magically come to me. And they forget to look about like, who's the person next to me? Who are the people in my cell phone? Like, who are the people I just need to tell about what I'm doing? and maybe they're not my right client, but they may know someone that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like for you, like the people you're talking to probably didn't send their kids to you, but they knew someone, or when someone said they had a problem, or, hey, my kid is thinking about going to Michigan, really struggling with the pressure and XYZ. They're like, boom, I know someone that can probably help you. You should check her stuff out.
Yeah.
And then ultimately they go back to social media, or they do the Google thing, and then they find out kind of a little bit more. Did you see that as a way on how people learned a little bit more about you? Is maybe they heard about you in person, and then they kind of went on the internets and kind of did their research, and then they ultimately reached out?
Yeah. So that's exactly how it happened. Excuse me. With my first client is that they had heard me on a podcast, and then I had done work at that particular high school, and it was just like how serendipitous the world came together. And so that's when they reached out to me. They found me on, my website, reached out, filled out a form, and booked a call with me, an intro call, to see of how to work with her daughter. So it was like,
right,
podcast, work with school locally, go to my website, come find me, boom, call.
So a lot of times, like in the tech world, we talk about minimal viable products. So what's the minimum thing that I need in order to get this off the ground, get it out into the world, and see if there is anything here? So in your case, if you were looking back at the beginning and you were like, what's my MVP? I'm not going to try and do everything. I'm going to try and do these few things really well. Like knowing what you know now and how clients ended up coming to you and learning about you, what would be like your, let's say, an MVP of marketing for your performance coaching business?
Oh, good question. I think it would be to go back just to creating an Instagram page saying, this is what I'm doing, and just get the thoughts out there.
Would website be a part of that? I mean, you talked about people coming to the website, filling out the form to, maybe do an intro call or whatever with you.
I don't know that website. Actually, I don't know. I think it would just be a scheduling link.
Okay.
Because quite honestly, that's what they found on my website. I don't ever remember them saying, hey, I went through your website. I was looking at what you do. It was more or less, I just heard you speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found a way to contact you and get on your calendar. So
right.
I don't even know that a website, quite honestly.
Right.
In the very beginning, is that useful?
And then did you do free kind of like 15-minute, 20-minute strategy calls or success calls or something like that to just make sure this is a good fit?
Oh, absolutely. So I make it a point to talk with both the parent and the athlete in my process. One, to get a feel for both of them and where I perceive they are in terms of how much buy-in they have. Because if the parents are bought in, that's great, right? They're the ones who pay.
Mm-hmm.
But if the athlete isn't, or there's not that connection between me and the athlete, then I don't want to say, hey, parents, I'll take your money just because you're willing to pay. It's
right.
more that to really have that connection with both of them, actually.
So that's a fair amount of time invested before you get paid at all for your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make sure that those people are converting into clients? Because you could do calls like that all day, and now you don't necessarily have time to even work with clients. And so is there a vetting process at all where if like the first call doesn't go well with the parent, like do you have any process there so that doesn't take on a life of itself?
Yeah. I mean, there have been a couple of parents who in the I ask instead of qualifying questions, I tend to ask disqualifying questions, to really figure out what the parent's motivation really is. And from there, if I feel that it's a fit with the athlete, then I'll request a meeting with the athlete. If I don't feel that there's a connection with the parents, I won't request a meeting with the athlete.
Do you find that there's a lot of times the parent is like, yes, we're in, and then the athlete's like, no, we're not, and then it falls apart? Or is it pretty close? If the parent says we're in, they have a good understanding of like where their kid is at, and the kid says I'm in as well?
Yeah, my experience thus far has been if the parents are in, then the athlete is in. And, I'm very conscious of asking the athlete, because there was one athlete that I met at first and I didn't necessarily feel the connection. Mm-hmm. And I put it out there and said, hey, I think this is what would really work for this athlete, but I don't know that this is the right time. And it was the first time in my life that I ever said anything like that, because I tend to be a people pleaser. And it was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll just take it on. And but it actually worked. There was probably about 2 months in between the first initial call with the parents and the athlete. And then eventually the parents called back and said, no, this is the right time. She's now in and she wants to go.
That's awesome. What does your marketing stack look like now? So now that you have, we'll call it an established business, you've been around long enough, right? Mm-hmm. Where you've worked with enough clients. And so where do you spend your time from a marketing standpoint?
Quite honestly, it's getting in. So before, when you asked me what my minimally viable product, and I said Instagram, and I think I want to take that back. That's where I'm spending a lot of my time is actually getting in front of having face-to-face time with people. Okay. And what I'm starting to put out there is the way that I'm looking for the right kind of client are the parents who are already investing in their child well beyond the sport, is how I put it, in terms of their own strength and conditioning coach, nutrition, right? They're trying to surround their athlete with additional resources outside of the immediate team, and getting in front of people, whether that's people who I know who are connected to parents, athletic directors. I'm trying to make a lot of inroads with athletic directors or school administrators, just to have the exposure in front of the immediate people here in Cincinnati.
100%. I think it's a great strategy. And then are you recording those talks and then chopping them up and throwing them on Instagram?
No, not yet. That's a great suggestion.
Well, we call it batching content, right? And so I honestly think even if you're an online coach, like there's within 5 miles of where you live, there is probably more than enough people to create an awesome business, a business that you would enjoy. But we think that because we're a kind of quote unquote online coach, we feel like we have to be online and we have to rule the social media world. Where when you're face to face, you can build authority like almost instantly. Like if you're in front of the room, just you standing in front of the room gives you authority, right? And people are going to trust you because they feel that someone would have vetted you and they're not just letting any Yahoo stand in the front of the room, right?
Right.
And so an easy next step is like, hey, you're already standing in front of the room, just like record it. And then you're going to say some smart stuff when you're in front of the room. Now let's just like take that smart stuff out and throw it on Instagram or throw it on other media platforms. Because what we see that stuff being is almost like a check, right? It's like a way to, is this person legit? Is this person real? Like, and if you have stuff there when they, Google you, like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm seeing some of the same stuff.
Yes. And, I have one of my dearest friends is in video and she's always like, remember, Lauren, get it. And I was like, yes, I know. What happens for me is I get so excited to be in front of these athletes and to talk and connect. And that's where all of my energy and just all of my attention goes. Again, that's just like being in front of these athletes. It's just my jam. I just love it. And I get so focused. I get distracted in terms of being a business owner and a coach and getting all of the things to be in that space. But I love talking to athletes. It's just, I don't know, pure joy for me.
That's awesome. So what is a day in the life look like right now for you as a performance coach?
Great question. So I'm actually, like I said, I work with a coach. I work on my own personal development, and I'm actually working on restraint, right? Going back to the minimally viable product. And so what I do is I do have quite a few clients right now. I think I have 7 total. So it's always preparing for their next session. What often happens is even though I have this structure and I follow it pretty closely per client, inevitably I'll have a session with a client, something new will come up, it will spark new inspiration. And so I'll go and either create a little bit more content around that to use, come back and use it with the athlete or use it with the next athlete. So I'm constantly iterating what we cover and making sure that it works for all of them. And I'm actually getting into the process of creating the academy. So I'm working with a partner to build all of that. So the next 90 days will be very much in terms of how to translate what we already do with one-on-one clients into the platform that will be used as the academy.
That's awesome. So let's kind of fast forward 3 years. What does the dream business look like?
Oh gosh. I am spending more of my time speaking. I love to speak. I'd love to get in front of audiences. As I mentioned, my husband thinks I'm absolutely crazy. He's like, you do realize you want to do something that most people would actually just die over. I'm like, yeah, I know. Right. I love it. I would rather speak to a room of 10,000 than, I don't know. Right. He thinks I'm so weird. But again, going to more of this lifestyle brand for athletes and that bringing in different experts. So it's not just about mindset and how to maximize the mental performance, but, bringing in nutrition, fitness, and other aspects and avenues that athletes are either exploring or that we see from an industry standpoint should be exploring. And what I would love to do is to build a clothing brand for athletes. And cool. I know there's a ton of athleisure out there, but there's a big story in terms of in my past that I want to be able to bring this to the forefront.
That's awesome. Have you always seen yourself as like an entrepreneur?
No. I knew I wasn't fit for corporate America. I just never felt that I belonged. We talked about that a little bit. Entrepreneurship is not in my family. My family are very traditional, like work. They all grew up in healthcare, and I didn't want to do healthcare. But it's funny. I'm the youngest in my family, and all these like birth order things. It's like the youngest are the most prone to be entrepreneurs. So I was like, well, maybe I stepped into my destiny at some point. But I love it. There's absolutely no way I could ever go back and work for a company.
As a gym owner, Coach Catalyst is the key to having low turnover. For several years, I struggled and spent 10 to 20 hours a week communicating with clients via phone calls, Facebook Messenger, email, and text messages. I had tried everything to make my life more efficient. I was at my wit's end. And then I found Coach Catalyst. Since starting the software, I have found a life again, and my clients are thanking me for being so involved in their fitness life. I've cut my daily commitment to interacting with over 300 clients to under 15 minutes a day and have streamlined my 6-week challenges. I couldn't recommend it more. I just don't know if I would even be here today if it wasn't for Coach Catalyst. If you don't have an account already, you're missing out and not helping the people you could be.
So you said you were in corporate for 15 years. Why did it take you 15 years to figure out this was your passion? I'm just curious, because I think a lot of people, this is something that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I always knew it wasn't my passion. I just didn't know that it could be any other way. Actually, I did know. I didn't believe that I could do it. And then the day where I had to do the PowerPoint presentation 4 times, it was the day that my fear of staying where I was outgrew the fear of taking a chance on myself.
Cool. Did life circumstances lead into as well? Because there's a level of security, right, from the corporate world. And sometimes people have young families or things like that. It's like, well, I don't want to maybe put others at risk for me kind of taking on this new thing. Was there any kind of outside pieces that maybe played into that as well, or not really?
Yeah, it was always in the back of my mind. And I'm going to sound super selfish when I say this. It had gotten to the point where it was almost necessary for my mental health to take the risk than to stay secure.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We just see this so often where people are in something they know they're not super passionate about, and they're maybe passionate about something else, but taking that leap is just so like there's so much emotion, there's so much fear that's involved, because our minds just always go to like worst case scenario. I'm going to do this and like everything's going to fall apart and like it's just going to be terrible, when usually our worst nightmares never ever get even close to coming true.
Yeah, and I just wanted to see if that was the case, right? I think I had found a saying along the way of like, I've survived 100% of my toughest days so far. And it was like, wait, why would I believe that I wouldn't be able to handle anything else?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this aha moment of, if I don't, it was that moment of, if I don't take the bet on myself right now, I will regret it. So I was like, fine, head first,
Do it.
feet first. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I mean, it's an inspiration to others that might be on the edge or maybe just doing a little bit, and to be able to jump in. And I think like even learning from the strategies that you talked about, hey, like get out in your local community, tell people what you were doing and who you can help and how you can help them. And then that may open a door that ultimately brings you clients.
Yeah. And I would also say you don't necessarily have to have it 100% figured out. Like whomever you are, like I have to have some structure to feel comfortable and confident explaining it to somebody else, but to have every single nuance figured out, give
Mm-hmm.
yourself some grace that it doesn't have to all be figured out, because what people will buy into is your passion for it,
right,
versus how you actually do it.
So would you say maybe a turning point for you was when you got really clear on who you were serving? Like you just knew, okay, this is the athlete who I want to serve.
Yes. And it was because I finally felt confident that I knew what I was talking about. And that was more of like, I knew great leadership development tactics and those sorts of things, but I don't know that I felt 100% confident talking about it, because I knew deep down inside it really wasn't my true passion.
Mm-hmm.
But when I landed on athletes, I remember people talking to me, or as I was speaking to people, of like, I'm so glad you got here, because this is where you're supposed to be. It's like they all knew it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or maybe they didn't know it. They just knew my energy. And once I finally started talking about and with athletes, they were like, oh yeah, this is where you're supposed to be.
Right.
And not that I required their validation, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, this feels the most right to me that I've ever felt in my professional career.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, we're going to kind of turn here a little bit, and I've got some like rapid fire things I like to ask people at the end.
Yes.
Maybe you took a peek at some of the questions that I may or may not ask. And maybe you haven't. It's even more fun when people haven't looked at it and it's just like a complete surprise to them. So let's rock out with a couple of these. First one, taco, burrito, or quesadilla?
Burrito.
Any like Chipotle burrito, or like you have a special burrito spot in Cincy?
No, not Chipotle. No, they're too big, and I can't eat them like I used to be able to eat them when I swam. When I swam, I could eat anything. No, but I just love all the fixes inside, and like,
okay,
we have some trucks here. I never remember the name of any of them, but I just love food truck burritos.
I like it. All right, cartoon world. What cartoon world do you wish you could spend a week in? Cartoon world.
Oh my God. What comes to mind is Animaniacs. Again, I may be dating myself in that respect.
That's awesome. I love Animaniacs.
I used to love that cartoon.
That would be a lot of fun. That is. I haven't heard that one yet. So it takes me back a little bit. That's awesome. All right. Something you have purchased for $100 or less that you feel like has had like disproportionate value. And I'll give you, if nothing comes to mind, I'll kind of give you some like things to think about. Maybe it's like a piece of tech. Maybe it's something that you work with in your everyday in work life. Maybe it's like a book that you've recently read or purchased.
Yeah. What is really coming to mind. So I have this like really fun dichotomy of like being performance, all in, hard work sort of thing. I'm starting to get into the concept of human design. I'm not sure if you're familiar with human design, but it's more of a woo kind of thing in terms of like using when we were born and how we entered this world to determine kind of what our true nature is. And it's a book that explains the 4 different profiles or 5 different profiles that people can fit in and kind of what that means and how each of our unique human designs like living into that design and how to bring that forward. And I've just learned a ton about myself in that respect. And as I look over my business journey, like when I was unknowingly living into my natural design, that's when things worked and there wasn't so much resistance. So it was a book on that.
So what are the designs based upon?
This is where the woo comes in. So part of it is
woo. That's good.
Yeah. So it's all about when you were born and when you were born. And so how all the planetary things come into alignment.
Okay.
So astrology, and there's like 3 other elements, but it's like, I'm still learning all of it. It's just brand new to me, but it's basically like how we came into the world and how the earth was aligned the moment we did.
Got it. So like year matters and time of year and all of that.
Time of year. Yes. Year, time of year, time of day that you were even born into it. And it also accounts for 3 months prior to when you were born. I haven't yet figured out why that's really important. But just diving in, just literally if 100%, I probably like 0.5% understand kind of how it all fits together. But looking at my natural design and the certain paths that are connected within me and what that means for me has blown my mind.
Cool. What was the name of it again? Do you know? Do you remember?
Human Design. Well, I can, the name of the book, no, but I can send that to you if you want to share
cool.
it.
Yes. We can put it in the show notes, but awesome. All right. Next one. If you were reincarnated as an animal based on your personality, what animal do you think you come back into the world as?
I feel like this would be a question my 9-year-old son would ask me. I'm not necessarily the biggest animal fan, so I don't necessarily know personalities, but what came to mind, and I don't know why, because I'm not a big fan of birds at all, but like a big macaw, like just bright and, they take in the world, they spit the world back out at you, like, they respond to the world. That's what comes to mind as a big, beautiful macaw.
I love it. All right. Last one here. If you could have dinner with anyone on the planet, past or present, who would you like to sit down with for a couple hours and break bread?
Man, Trevor, you get some questions going here. Actually, who I would love to talk with is Trevor Malwad. For anybody who knows out there, he wrote It Takes What It Takes, and he is all the father behind neutral thinking, or maybe there's somebody before him that he came from. But he used to work at IMG and was one of their big sports psychologists or mental performance gurus. And he recently died. He died in 2022, I think, from cancer. But I would have loved to have talked with him about his thoughts in terms of mental performance and how he came to be and how he started working with big athletes and just his journey in that world.
And for people that are unfamiliar, IMG is?
I forget what IMG stands for, but it's a school in Florida, all for athletes. And it's an academy that some elite athletes go to develop into kind of the next level. I think some of them take it as like gap years to enhance their skills and then potentially go for bigger opportunities, whether that be in college or after college, I think.
Cool. I love it. Well, Lauren, this has been fun. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and really sharing your journey. If people want to learn a little bit more about you, kind of where can they go to kind of follow, see what you're doing, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a great conversation. Performancereimagined.com is the website. And then for Instagram, it's at performance_reimagined_. And in either of those places has a link to my calendar because I love to meet more in depth with people. So if you want to talk one-on-one, whether you're a coach, an athlete, a parent, it doesn't matter. I always love meeting with people. So can do that.
Well, this is awesome. So I have, just kind of finish up. So I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I kind of think about my athletic career. So I ended up playing professional basketball in Europe, and I think about the different aspects of it where we had the performance thing figured out pretty early on. We got the nutrition thing figured out kind of in college. And then the thing that was always missing was this like cognitive behavioral, this like psychology component where I wasn't at a big enough school for it to be like part of like what we do. But when I think back on it, I think that was probably like a missing link in a lot of, well, even my career and also lots of other careers. There are a few times I reached out and I kind of saw a psychologist for a period of time. But I think this is awesome. And I think it's a huge component. If someone can kind of master their mindset, their brain, like it's the sky's the limit when they already have the athletic ability and they have all these other things to reach that. So thank you for the work you're doing and keep it up.
Oh, appreciate it. And thank you for the work you're doing and providing insights to coaches and how they can do this and sidestep some of the unnecessary work to figure it all out.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks again for coming on, Lauren.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. If you are a coach looking to do more for your clients than just workouts, give Coach Catalyst a test drive. Try it for 14 days. Jump on call with your personal strategy coach, Ashley, and see how easy technology can be, all for free. Tell them Trevor sent you. Until next time, keep changing lives.